So when we look at safety, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. There's a lot of speculation always in any of the incidents. You know, is it dangerous cargoes? Were there batteries involved? There's so much we should be doing to stop this happening. How can there be these problems? Why don't we get up a new safety program, a new way of doing something? And then there's a cost involved in it. So is the industry taking unnecessary risks in pursuit of profit? I'm asking our panel to come here. We're starting off with Dr. Ashley Nunes, who's an independent analyst, Henrik Ambak, who's the Senior Vice President for Cargo Operations for Emirates, and Mohammed Ali BinYalwan Al-Falahi from Dubai Customs. Mohammed, if you'd like to join us on the stage, please. I want to start, if I can, Ashley, with you. Safety programs. We heard a bit about that this morning as we got in there. Can they be justified in an increasingly competitive industry? Is the risk great enough that for airlines that, as we heard, are struggling to make any profits, is it justifiable to be spending as much on safety as we are?
Well, the simple answer to this, in my opinion, is no. If I may speak in economic terms just for a second, there are two numbers, for all intents and purposes, that matter the most to air carriers today. The first is the RASM, which is the revenue generated per available seat mile. And the second is the CASM, which is the cost per available seat mile. The difference between these two values is, for all intents and purposes, the profit margin of an airline. As Hussein mentioned earlier, for 2013, IATA estimated that the average profit margin for an airline was approximately 2.6%. And to put that into dollar figures for you, that's about $5.94, okay, per passenger. That's how much the airline is actually making off of a single passenger on average. The issue of whether or not a safety program can be justified is extremely complex, but I would like to phrase my answer within the context of fatigue legislation, which is a great example of this. Many of you might probably recall the Colgan crash back in 2009 that spurred a whole outpouring of support and the need to enact fatigue legislation. When the FAA worked on coming up with the numbers associated with this, there was an entire risk analysis that was actually done. And the conclusion, or the way they generally do this is they estimated that the cost of a human life was $6.2 million. The cost of losing a hull is approximately $4 million. The cost of the investigation itself is approximately $5.6 million. Depending on the load factor that is associated with the accident, you're looking at anywhere in the range of $450 to $600 million. The cost of enacting fatigue management legislation was estimated to be approximately $306 million, and this is for a commercial airliner. For cargo carriers, they were exempt completely from the rule because the actual cost rose to $550 million. Now, to give you a sense, and Hussein alluded to this earlier, about how rare airplane accidents actually are. The rate of a hull loss today is approximately 0.15%. Not 15%, not 1.5%, but 0.15%. And what that means is that if you were to get on an airplane every single day, you would have to fly for 123,000 years before you were actually involved in a fatal accident. So the issue of whether or not the cost of a safety program that's presumably, once again, biting into an airline's profit margin that is already extremely thin, whether or not these programs can be justified is certainly an economic question, a philosophical question, a moral question, but I'm not really sure that it can.
Yeah, good point. Henrik, what's your view on that? Do you think we spend too much on safety, or as we said this morning, every single life counts and we should do everything we can to save that life?
I think the money is very well spent, and I think airlines will continue to spend heavy on this. It's easy for us to put ourselves in a car and turn the key. We feel comfortable about that. We believe that we can actually control the natural forces in play. That may not always be the case, but that's what we believe. The moment we step inside an aircraft, we take a bigger risk. and people think differently. Do we really want to take this risk or not? And I think the success of civil aviation for mass people transport has a lot to do with low casualty numbers, which again means that if airlines stop investing fundamentally in safety management systems and developing this, you also run the risk of having increased fatalities, which always become big news in the world media. And you might see a beginning distrust in what we're doing as an aviation sector. So I strongly believe that there will be a continued investment in safety management and safety practices. Simply from, and we want to talk about it from a profitability standpoint, there's nothing more undermining an airline's profitability than an accident. There's the whole cost of the accident in that itself, and there's the customer, you can say, non-loyalty reflections on you having had an accident. So I think even from a very cynical financial perspective, it makes a lot of sense.
But if I'm right, we've spent a lot of money on safety programs. We still have a similar number of accidents, just as more people fly, so therefore the chances, you know, the numbers do drop down, but we still have accidents. So we're spending all that money. Are we spending it on the right things? Should we be spending it on something different?
I would have a difficulty. I'm not a specialist in aviation safety as such. You can just make the fundamental observation that when you start a new activity, in the beginning, to create improvement is easy. It's the further you get up the curve, the more you have to invest to raise your performance even more. And with the very high performance level aviation have right now in terms of safety, the next fractions of percentages in performance improvement will take more time and will be more expensive. But that doesn't mean that the industry should not continue pushing. I think the moment that the traveling public gets the feeling that aviation is not serious about this, they may be more doubtful whether they really want to fly or fly as often as they do today. I mean, air travel is today considered a no-brainer. It's something you do. I don't think anybody booking a ticket really takes into consideration that they're going to put themselves 10 kilometers into the air, which is, you can say, in normal sense, an unnatural thing to do. They feel comfortable about it, and they only do that because they believe that airlines are serious about this, invest in it, and has good management practices.
But I thought the point made earlier by Martin, I think was quite a good one, when he said about the people who made the decision to not take the train and went on the car, doubled the number of people that were killed that day and took cars instead of trains. The number of people who take trains doubled the number that would have taken aircraft on the same. So it seems that the public actually isn't that focused on the risk. If they did, they wouldn't drive and they wouldn't take trains, they would fly everywhere. So, you know, do we believe, is it just us saying the public would lose confidence in aviation, when in fact they don't seem to lose confidence in driving cars that are dangerous?
I think it has a lot to do with whether you feel you're in control of what you're doing. Everybody behind the steering wheel feel, I command this vehicle, and feel comfortable about it, well knowing that the accident rate is unreasonably high, you could say. The moment you put yourself into an aircraft, you know you are at risk. I was previously listening to some conversations Boeing entertained on the pilotless aircraft, having the view that this is available technologically perspective. You have drones already. So you could have the driverless aircraft if you wanted to. You have some air traffic control issues still to sort out, but doable. But Boeing even believing that they would need a 5-year span of accident-free cargo unmanned aircraft before anybody would risk stepping their foot into an aircraft. And that's funny, because if you're in the industry, you know that a pilot today, he is important, but the aircraft is far down the road, self-sustained. Can take off itself, it can land itself if it wants to. But the public is still feeling confident because there's a captain and a first officer, even though technology could replace them. And when people like Boeing that would like to sell things and more advanced, they have, you can say, doubts by when are they able to push that product and make public perception accept that you put yourself into a driverless aircraft. You're happy to put yourself into a driverless metro. Do it at the airport here, you do it in other cities around the world. You feel comfortable about this metro or train not having a driver. But would we all in here feel comfortable entering an aircraft with no pilot?
I'm going to just ask the audience that one. Can you do me a favour? How many of you would be happy getting into a pilotless aeroplane? Look at this. This is aviation professionals. And there's about 2%, I would say, did that. So I think Boeing's right. You're going to need a lot more than 5 years of trouble-free cargo flying before, you know, if we're not changing it. But actually, there's an interesting point. And again, Ashley, if I come back to you, with the idea of safety assurance in the industry. I mean, if we know that flying a pilotless aircraft is safe, it's all to do with how do we feel about it. So the safety assurance, if you like, is the industry responsible for providing that to the customers? Because we've said along, safety is not something we would ever compete with, and yet airlines do. I mean, there are messages. Certainly in other parts of the world, you know, we're a safe carrier. We, you know, Qantas never crashes, and so on. There's the messages go out. You know, should we be competing on safety? If you've got a good safety record, should you be competing on it? And how much should the industry be doing in reassuring its customers that it's safe?
You know, the challenge associated with competing on the basis of safety ultimately sort of goes back to whether or not we can show a return on our investment. You know, it costs money. So can you actually show, for example, that higher ticket fares to consumers, who are ultimately the individuals paying for all this, actually results in a tangible benefit for them? This goes to issues of how humans conceptualize risk. So, for example, if I tell you that the risk of a hull loss of your airplane going down is 0.15%, but if you pay $5 more for your plane ticket, it goes even lower to 0.14%. Are you willing to pay the extra amount? And I suspect that most people are not. Once again, because the likelihood of these types of events are so incredibly low. You know, showing return on an investment for safety is extremely difficult, and the reason why is because there is an inherent perception that the relationship that exists between, let's take the example of a pilot falling asleep or an air traffic controller falling asleep while managing airplanes. We make an assumption that there is a linear relationship, that if you fall asleep or if you do something unsafe, it will ultimately result in a loss of life. The air transportation industry is an example of a domain where the relationship is not linear. It is not the case that just because you're not, unlike driving, for example, where if you fall asleep at the wheel, the chances that you're going to wreck the car are pretty high. That's not exactly the case in aviation. And the reason why is because there are multiple layers of defenses, checklists, automation that exist that mask the true likelihood of something very bad happening. So, going to the issue of, what is the responsibility of the industry, for example, I often turn it around and say, well, is the industry responsible for providing safety? Well, it depends on whether or not the consumer is willing to pay for it, and how much are you willing to pay for it? A great example of this is Ryanair, who I'm sure many of you have flown in the past. Ryanair gets a lot of criticism because of their pilot schedules. They try to maximize pilot flying times, for example, in order to maximize revenue. In 2006, a British television channel aired a secret film in which they were showing the flying schedules of pilots, and they found essentially that these people were working incredibly fatiguing schedules. The public overwhelmingly says that fatigue is their #1 concern when it comes to flying. Pilots falling asleep, air traffic controllers falling asleep. So how did the public actually respond to this film? They made Ryanair the most profitable airline in Europe. Okay, and clearly the argument, the rebuttal to this is, I guess all of our concerns, passenger concerns over safety, are tempered by the prospect of flying from London to, London to Frankfurt, for example, for £10, right? So again, it's how much are you willing to actually pay for?
That's a good point. And Mohammed, I want to bring you into this a moment, because in Dubai Customs, you're dealing with the public every day.
Right.
We know that there are safety issues taking things onto aircraft as passengers.
Yeah.
Did the public get that, or do you find that there are still lots of people doing things that are actually potentially very dangerous?
First of all, this is Mohammed Al-Falahi, Airport Customer Investigation Manager. And what we found when we are comparing each year to other, that's still the passenger, they are not awareness about what they should take and what they shouldn't take it. And mostly they are bringing just like pesticides, bullets, and some chemicals. So we are always looking for the security perspective. That's where the main point or where the last point have been checked, the passenger, they did not discover all the things. And when you are asking the passengers about the bullets or any other chemicals which they are used to bring, they will say, no one informed us about that it's not allowed to take it on the board.
So the bullets?
Yep.
Why would somebody take a bullet on an aeroplane?
Usually when we are asking them about the bullets, they will say, it's my hobby, or just I have a hobby that I really like to collect different type of bullets. And the thing is, all the bullets are real. So we are counting each bullet, that one could be killing one person. So we are very strict about it, and we are taking the bullets from the passenger. But end of the day, still the question, that's how did you take it to the board, or how did you take it on the aircraft? Some of them, they are just blaming their teenagers, children, that we don't know that he took along with him. And some of them, they are, I think, retired army people. They are using just to keep, to memorize these bullets about the old days, and they are keeping the bullets along with them wherever they are traveling. But usually it's not allowed, and it's prohibited as per the law all of the world. I think that's it's a real bullet. We cannot joke with a real bullet. Even if it was a single bullet, it could be kill any person. And by the way, you don't need a weapon to use the bullet. You can use it without weapon. It's just like a general knowledge. If you have a hammer, you can use the hammer for the bullet. For that reason also, we are asking him, okay, do you know how to use this bullet? They are saying, or how can you use it without weapon? The passengers will say, definitely, I don't know. Without weapon, I cannot use it. But they should know that even without weapon, we can use the bullet to kill someone.
So, yeah. So there's a lot of responsibility on there. And, you know, this whole point about the safety of the flight depends a lot earlier than just when you get on the aeroplane.
Right. My, adding to your point, my message or my advice to all the companies, aircraft companies or to airlines companies, that please advise the passenger that if we have even single chemical things or bullets, they should not take it to the aircraft. It doesn't matter if it's chemical or bullet, whatever. I think it will be harmful for the aircraft, and it will really will be a big tragedy if something wrong have happened or gone with that chemical parts which they are bringing.
But that brings us back, doesn't it, to that whole thing about the safety message. Do we actually get it? Because I know every time I check in, you know, there's a big sign behind saying, have you got any of these things with crosses on it? And I think, no, I carry everything that I carry anyway. So people are ignoring the safety message. And if that has an impact on the aircraft, and that has an impact, as you say, one bullet can be one person's life. If it comes into the country, you know, there is safety messages. What do we do to make the traveling public recognize that this is serious? And you're talking about chemicals. I mean, I presume some people must bring chemicals unintentionally almost.
About the chemicals, I don't know why, but people, when they are traveling, they are using to travel or to take a part or take a percentage of that chemicals And that chemicals, maybe for any experiment, for any reason, they will take it to the aircraft. That chemicals, it will affect, first of all, on the inspectors, whoever, because when sometimes we find a chemical in the bag, we don't know either that one chemical, or it's a normal powder, or it's a chemical powder. When we have a safety feature, the inspector will wear the gloves and everything, but again, I don't think so far that the gloves will save the inspector because, by that chemical powders. So whenever we are trying to discover there is anything in the screen, if there is any chemical powder or any kind of powder, we are trying not to touch that powder. We do care about our inspectors, the custom inspectors, and for that reason we are not touching the bag. We are just keeping the bag, and then we are waiting the passenger. Sometimes that process will delay the passenger because the passenger will be not in the airport, might be he left or he's a transit passenger. So once he will come and he will open the bag, okay, he has to declare if he have anything chemical. Because the chemicals, we cannot joke with the chemicals. Chemicals are really harmful for anyone will touch it. Or still, you don't need a lighter or a match box for chemical. It will be just like will burn in the aircraft without any reason. You know that, I think, and you are aware about it.
Okay, Henrik, I mean, this with cargo, you're carrying freight every day across Emirates. Dangerous goods, how dangerous are they?
Well, that's an interesting question, isn't it? I mean, you can say the whole word dangerous goods implies that this is a very dangerous undertaking, and I think if this whole concept came up today, another word would have been found to name this category of shipments. It would probably have been something with higher risk shipments and so forth. I think the beauty about dangerous goods is that once it's being transported correctly, it's not dangerous at all. And you also see very, very few incidents and very, very few accidents arising from the transport of dangerous goods. So we consider in general dangerous goods quite safe. We consider it quite safe because it's a very heavy regulated environment. Both the shippers, the forwarders and the airlines involved are trained. There's a whole set of procedures in place to make sure that these commodities, once they are loaded on aircraft, are safe. And you can just look at the accident statistic, you'll see very, very few issues related to the transport of what could be dangerous if not done correctly.
So who makes the rules on what's dangerous and what isn't?
Well, actually, and thank God for that, it's not the airlines themselves, it's an intergovernmental United Nations panel. It's a part of ICAO. So it's governments in collaborations that put together the game rules. It's what is called the ICAO Technical Instructions, which IATA as an airline organization takes over and turns into dangerous goods regulation. But they are just publishing what an intergovernmental panel has already put together. So that means you can say governments themselves are putting the framework for what we are allowed to transport and how it should be documented and packed.
Okay. If we look at some things that, you know, again with a public perception, if you like, that can be dangerous, and because we've read a lot about them, are the lithium batteries. They seem to be the curse at the moment, that there's expectation that lithium batteries were the cause of cargo carriers going, there's been fires. Yes. Are they a problem? Why is there such a focus on these batteries?
There is a focus on lithium batteries because the lithium battery technology, as it arose, was a great, affordable way of storing energy. Unfortunately, it's also a technology that, if not applied correctly in the manufacturing and use process, has certain risks associated with it. You have to go about manufacturing lithium batteries. I'm not a manufacturing specialist, but you have to be very careful in your manufacturing process and do this correct. Then the battery is going to be safe, no problems. Unfortunately, in some part of the world, there are manufacturers who set about to produce low-cost replacement batteries, which does not meet the necessary standards, and some of these batteries are not safe. That's one of the reasons why some airlines, Emirates included, have a number of our own, you can say, bans or embargoes. That means there are, you can say, categories of lithium batteries that by the UN and IATA rules are allowed on aircraft that we ban because we consider them more risky and therefore put for ourselves a lower threshold or narrower band what we allow to be transported.
Okay, so then they were your rules that you make, banning these
Yep.
particular rules, yeah?
Regarding the exactly the point was about you saying about what exactly? Can you please again?
Yeah, the rules that stop. You say that Henrik, you were saying there are certain things that are more risky that get stopped. So does that come back to one airline, or is it a country? So does Dubai say you cannot carry this on there, you cannot bring it on as a passenger or whatever?
Actually, what we are doing, as long the passenger he don't know about all the rules and regulations, so we are trying just to take it from the passenger, and it will be just like advice for him that it's not allowed. Maybe he's not aware about the rules and about the regulations. So definitely we are not giving him back. So if something is harmful, it doesn't mean only about the weapons, or there is sometimes white weapons or any of the other materials which could be used for to harm a person. But the thing is, we have statistics about it that big numbers of these things are coming from all the countries. I don't know, either they have some issue about the security is not 100% is going on the track, or otherwise will be some passengers they are hiding some small pieces of any weapon just to ignore the custom point or the security point. Again, when we'll catch these things, there will be a procedure, and the passenger should go along that procedure. But as long as he's a passenger, not a company, then you have some just like a facility you are providing to the passenger that it will be just like an undertaken letter not to bring next time. And definitely we have just like a system either regarding the names and the passengers, whoever will bring something prohibited. The message here always about it's a general knowledge. You know what's allowed and what's not allowed, especially if you are traveling a lot or traveling frequently. That means they have a general knowledge what they should take to the aircraft and what shouldn't take to the aircraft. The rest about the chemicals. The chemicals they are bringing for a certain purpose, and we are just taking that chemical. But the thing is that chemical is very hard to shift it from place to place, and it's just like a waste of time and waste of money. It's cost to Dubai Customs to shift it or transfer from a place to place to just destroy that chemical.
Any questions out here at all, please? There's one over here. Thank you.
Thank you. It's Martin Chalk. You saw me on the panel earlier. What a fascinating discussion on risk. Dangerous goods and passengers willfully taking items that we in the industry know to be a significant enhanced risk on board, and yet they don't consider risk in flying because it doesn't return on investment, so we shouldn't necessarily invest. At the other end of the panel. But the reality is risk, when it's underlying a decision, is most often a perception. It's not a reality. And so the perception of risk just after a railway accident is it's safer to go by car. That's not the reality. The perception of risk when carrying your own bullets on an airplane is that there is no enhanced risk, and yet we know that there is an enhanced risk. And so the reality from Henrik there was it is worth investing in safety, because without maintaining the perception of very low risk, even though the risk itself is low, we won't continue to make the money in the industry. We won't continue to grow the industry. And so I think one of the fundamentals that underlies this is that we need to recognize people are not rational when they analyze risk. Certainly passengers are not, but we must be.
Now, if you allow a comment to that, I mean, I fully agree with the observation provided, and we heard before about the issue with fatigue risk management at an airline like Ryanair. There's publication that they have bad or challenging schedules for their pilots, and it doesn't change that people travel with Ryanair. But if you now make the thought example that during the same year that this had been in the press, Ryanair would also have lost an aircraft, even if they had lost it for an aircraft for other reasons than crew fatigue, that might have had a completely different impact on people's choice of using Ryanair. Now there was a media story about their practicing in crew management, but there was no, you can say, there was a warning of a fire, but no fire. So public perception is okay, and that I think is very correct back to how people perceive things. If you had had an accident at the same time, it may have had a completely different impact on people's choices.
Because I wonder if it comes down that individual's risk assessment is that I know that I'm carrying 3 bullets, or I know that I'm carrying something with a battery that's a bit iffy, but it's not gone wrong before, I'm in control. Our problem is everybody else doesn't know.
Yeah.
You know, so it's an education, isn't it, really, that we need to educate people. But can I just pick up, Henrik, on something there, because these are people that are actually flying that are making the risk, taking the decision on the risk. Many of your customers, in terms of cargo, are not actually flying, are they? They're packing up a box with stuff and sending it off. They're not even involved if it goes wrong. Do you find that there are cargoes you're carrying that you didn't actually know what was in it, that people are beating the system, that there are bullets getting into packing cases that are coming on your aircraft?
Of course, it's obvious that we will, on occasion, move things that we don't want to move because we don't know that we moved them. You can say for those manufacturers and those people that are part of the trading process for manufacturing over wholesaling, forwarding, etc., that is playing by the rule book, we feel quite comfortable. For the rest, yes, there is scanning and screening procedures in place in most airports, or in all airports we serve around the world. So we believe there's a relatively high threshold for entry into the Emirates system. But can we make a square statement that we never move anything we don't want to move? We cannot say that. The industry has the fundamental problem of what you call hidden or undeclared dangerous goods, where somebody sends something they should not have sent. The customs authorities around the world, and Dubai is one good example, with regular intervals during their screens and scans, find things that are removed from transport so that we lower that risk. But are these tests and scans, are they 100% watertight? Unfortunately not. On the other hand, how often does it go wrong? Very, very seldomly. But there remains a residual risk. That's correct.
So should we be, I don't know, making penalties tougher? You know, are they tough enough already? If somebody is doing something, should there be if you like, a greater risk of their freedom or their...
I mean, in most jurisdictions around the world, it's a criminal offense to move, you can say, undeclared dangerous goods, and both corporate entities and individuals are being, you can say, prosecuted accordingly. So it's not something that the governments around the world in general take lightly. You can always discuss whether the punishment is harsh enough, whether the structure works and so forth, but the principal notion that this is a criminal offense definitely exists.
Yeah,
not just in Dubai, but on a global basis.
And actually, how do you feel on this now?
Well, you know, once again, I can give a very crude example of this. You know, we all talk about how we're safety professionals, we understand the risk. How many people in this room have at one point or another driven your car while using your telephone? I know I have. No, come on. It's got to be more than that. I mean, you know, and I suspect that all of us continue to do it. We know it is risky behavior, yet we continue to do it. And the reason why is because the last time we did it, nothing bad happened. I think that if you were to, for example, have penalties for engaging in these types of risky behavior, you might see a residual benefit. But once again, the likelihood of something happening, something bad happening is so low that it would be very difficult to see a quantifiable benefit in a situation like this, at least.
Final question over here, please.
Hi. Yeah, talking about carrying sharp objects or risky objects into the aircraft, I can share with you one experience that I had. I was traveling to attend my friend's wedding, and I bought a very expensive, you know, the cutlery set. It was kind of gold-plated and nice, you know. And I was, you know, carrying it with me, and I got, you know, they caught it in the scanner, and they threw it away. I said, what is this? This is very expensive things. Oh, no, 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 you should know that. You cannot carry these sharp objects. I said, all right, can you give it to the captain to carry it for me? No. I said, okay. He threw it away. Guess what? I went to the, you know, my seat, and when the lunch came, they gave me silverware, sharp forks and knives. So how do you explain that? Why would you give me sharp metal forks and knives on flight, in the flight, and will not allow me to carry my own gift?
Okay. Now, again, the issue here, it's about white weapons, and white weapons are still, you can kill someone, you can, it could cause so many incidents or accidents, and I think you are talking about a part of metal using only and only, I think, for showcase or something. But I think you did not follow the case unless because I think either the customs or any other security department, whenever they are 100% sure that this one is not for to harm someone, in fact, it's just like a showcase, they will return it back to you, definitely. I'm sure about it.
I've got some sympathy with you. I don't know if you've seen toasting forks that you can cook crumpets on a fire. I took one of those and it got, I asked first whether it was okay and it was. So it was taken away from me by a different security guy. However, the woman next to me had 10-inch knitting needles. Okay. And they were fine. Knitting's okay. You can take somebody's eye out, but you can't toast a crumpet. So we need consistency on our rules. Gentlemen, I'm sorry we've come to the end of the time we've got allotted for this session. Ladies and gentlemen, please show your appreciation to our panel. Thank you very much.